Well, good morning and welcome to a video with a difference, because today I'll be talking about the part of a vehicle collection you don't see in my videos. Yes, we are going to be talking about what I actually do at the point at which we're buying and collecting a vehicle, the bit you don't see, the bit off camera, which I can't film for obvious reasons on the day because I'll be with a customer on private property or on business premises. But today we have the TMC yard, we have my own lovely BMW 528i as an example, and so I'm just going to show you basically what I do when I look around, collect and pay for a vehicle. Now, the first thing to bear in mind is that we're not just turning up and hoping for the best when it comes to the condition of a vehicle. When TMC buys a vehicle, they'll have asked for a detailed walk-around video of the vehicle. They'll have asked for multiple photographs, so they should have a pretty comprehensive idea of what to expect before I even set off, and a pretty good idea of what they're therefore prepared to pay for the vehicle in the first place. But inevitably, everything is not always exactly as it seems, and so in a nutshell, my job is to check that everything is as we expect, and if anything isn't, it's my job to let TMC or whoever sent me know. So of course, during my usual videos, after I've said goodbye to you at the station or wherever, I will meet the customer there and we will travel back to their business premises or home together, where I will check over the vehicle, we'll do the purchasing, and then I catch up with you a little bit later and introduce you to the vehicle. Now, in many cases, the customer will actually turn up in the vehicle itself, which means that I can drive us both back to wherever we need to go. And obviously I'd need to test drive the vehicle anyway, so that kind of in itself counts as a test drive. And then comes the important bit, checking over the vehicle. Now, I should add a disclaimer at this point. I'm not intending this video on being an exhaustive list of all the things that you should check when buying a used vehicle. There are plenty of other videos already online that give you lots of information about exactly that. So this is simply an overview of what I do personally as a tray plate driver. I'm not an expert mechanic, but I've seen and driven a lot of cars to the extent that I can tell the difference between a good and a bad one pretty quickly. Of course, when it gets back to the dealership, it will undergo further checks. We'll do what's called a PDI or pre-delivery inspection check on the vehicle to make sure everything's okay. It'll get serviced and MOT'd if needed, and any faults or problems will be rectified prior to sale. So yes, checking over the vehicle, there are four main things that I'm checking really. The first is the cosmetic condition of the vehicle, the second is the interior electronics, the third is under the bonnet, and fourth and finally, test drive, just to check that everything drives okay. Okay, so let's start with the cosmetic condition. Let's have a quick look at my car, of course, which is today standing in for a car that we might be buying for business. And a lot of this is really the kind of stuff that you've heard before. We're looking for any kind of scratches, dents or bumps around the car. I tend to look in the places where the car is most vulnerable, of course. So I know that my car, for example, I don't know if you can see it here, it's got a kind of scuff here on the corner of the front bumper. That's a very kind of common place for there to be a damage on the car. I mean, my car's obviously 27 years old, although I am annoyed about that because I don't know how it got there. Yeah, we're looking at the corner extremity, so we're looking at the corner of all the bumpers, we're looking around the base of the bumpers as well to see if there's any kind of marks or bumps along there. You can see, obviously, again, 27 years of use, there are a few marks and little bumps and signs of use along the bottom of the bumper there on my car. We're also checking places like here along the load lip here underneath the loading area of the boot. That's a very common place for there to be marks and scratches, particularly on commercial vehicles, for example. Something like a van, that's going to be a very common place for there to be minor damage for obvious reasons, things getting loaded in and out. I mean, we are realistic at the end of the day. Obviously, something like a van, it's a commercial vehicle. You'd be deluding yourself, frankly, if you turned up and expected a 70,000 mile van not to have any signs of use at all. Of course it will. We're not expecting it to be like a new vehicle. Like I said, it's really just a case of checking that everything is as we expected in the first place, that there aren't any nasty surprises, basically. I'll be looking for rips and tears in the interior fabric, the side bolster of the driver's seat. Sorry about my shadow here. That's the kind of place where you're going to get a lot of wear and tear on some vehicles. In fact, you can see that on my car, you know, there's a crack there in the plastic on the side of the seat. I'll be looking for any kind of signs of damage or scratches or anything on the interior around the place. I'll open all the doors, check all the seats, just make sure everything is ship shape. I'll also be looking for signs of accident damage, of course, so I'll be looking at all the panel gaps around the car, making sure that they're equal in size all around the car and that there aren't discrepancies in the panel gaps, you know, where it's narrower at one end than it is at the other. I might look for little signs of there having been a respray at any point, so little signs of overspray around the plastic fittings and the edges of the headlights and the rubber fittings around the bonnet, that kind of thing, around the windscreen. So little signs of paint spray that have strayed onto the plastic or the rubber fittings around the panels, that could be a sign of accident repair. Sometimes I notice signs of paint repair. I mean, this isn't the case on my car, but you might notice a part of the vehicle where the paint finish is just a little bit matte, a little bit flat looking, not quite up to the standard of the paint of the rest of the vehicle. It'll feel a little bit rough. So that's quite possibly just that the vehicle's had a bump or scrape at some point and it's had a smart repair done to quickly fix that, but a good quality paint repair should be almost unnoticeable. So if it is noticeable, that could be a little bit of extra cost for us in terms of getting that fixed and repaired up to forecourt standard. Of course, the real challenge with this, and it seems ironic me talking about this today because it is boiling today, but the real challenge with this is if it's raining. So obviously if the car's covered in water droplets and it's very wet, it's going to be a lot harder to see all this kind of thing, especially things like little more minor scratches and that kind of stuff. And if there's one occasion, actually, I remember I was collecting a Nissan Qashqai from up in Norfolk and it was raining so heavily. I mean, I would have got absolutely soaked even just walking around the outside of the vehicle. So we actually drove to a petrol station and I just parked it under the canopy and just did my checks under the canopy of the petrol station. So yes, checking all the electronics and the switchgear, that speaks for itself really. I just check that everything works. So I check all the electric windows work, I'll check all the switches there, check the electric mirrors, I'll check the sunroof if it has one. Obviously not the case on my car from 1998, but if it has a touchscreen infotainment system, I'll check the touchscreen works. I'll check all the cameras work, reversing cameras, that kind of thing. On a four-wheel drive vehicle, I will check that the four-wheel drive engages, including low ratio. Of course, I don't need to drive it in low ratio, I just need to check it engages. And I will check all the fan speeds work. So I will check all the fan speeds and check that the air conditioning is functioning as it should, that it doesn't need regassing. Under the bonnet is an important part of the check, of course. Under here I will be checking all the fluid levels. So I will check the oil on the dipstick. It's a bit difficult for me to do that with one hand, so please excuse me for not taking the dipstick out. But I will be checking obviously that the oil level is correct and that there's no residue or water contamination on the dipstick. I will, as you can see, I've already taken the oil cap off. I will be doing the usual milk check under the oil filler cap there, making sure that there's no kind of gunky mayonnaise under there. We all know that means that potential head gasket failure. I'll be checking the coolant levels in the coolant expansion tank down here, making sure that the coolant is the right colour and that that's not contaminated with oil or anything else nasty looking, making sure the level's correct there. I recently went to see a diesel car that we were buying and I took the oil filler cap off and there was all this kind of gunky black residue on the inside, and when I checked the dipstick there was some of it on the dipstick as well, and it turned out that that was carbon build-up on the diesel engine, so that was a definite no-no for us. We walked away from that one, I'm afraid, but that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for under the bonnet, just little telltale signs. I will just be checking all around the engine for anything that I personally think may be the sign of a problem, so I'll be looking for any kind of leaks, any fluid leaks, oil leaks obviously from around the engine. I will also check underneath the vehicle for any kind of signs of oil leak on the ground where it's been parked, and on the bottom of the engine itself, underneath the engine bay itself, if there's any oil there. Like I said, I'm not an expert mechanic. I might be able to see if there's a potential issue there, I just might not be able to tell you exactly what it is. Under the bonnet is actually also a really good time to check further for any signs of accident damage. Just checking to see if there's any kind of signs of welding or repair there. I'll just be looking at nuts and bolts around the engine bay that look like they might have been tampered with, you know, wings or panels that might have been replaced, any kind of parts that appear out of line or a little bit bent along the front of the vehicle. Anything like that just points towards it having been in a front end collision. Right, like I said, this is just an overview. This is not an exhaustive list of everything that you should be looking for when you're buying a used car. But that is the exterior and interior checks complete. There's just one very important part left to do, and that is to take the vehicle for a test drive. So when I'm out test driving a vehicle, the owner usually comes with me. I would need to try and get a feel for the vehicle as quickly as possible. I usually only take it for a test drive for maybe 10-15 minutes or something like that, not too long really. But ideally I want to get the vehicle up to at least about 60 miles an hour if I can, which can be easier said than done depending on where I'm collecting the vehicle. Obviously collecting from a major city or something like that is just not always possible. It can be a bit of a pain, to be honest. Test driving a vehicle somewhere like London, you really can't get up very much speed anywhere. But yes, getting up to a bit of speed, it just gives the vehicle a bit of a chance to warm up, and it allows it to go through all the gears. So on a manual gearbox I can check that it doesn't crunch into any gears and that the clutch feels okay, that there's plenty of life left in the clutch. On an automatic, like my car, I'll be checking that it changes smoothly and when it should do. I will check that there are no warning lights on the dash, of course. And just all the usual things really. Does it smoke under acceleration? Does it stop in a straight line? Are there any bumps or knocks coming from the suspension or noises from the wheels or the engine? All the usual things really. There's one occasion I remember when I was test driving a Mitsubishi L200 pickup truck in Hull, and we were buying this truck from an older gentleman, and he was travelling with me in the car. I was taking it for a test drive, and there was this really high-pitched noise, and I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It was like it was coming from all around. It didn't sound mechanical, but I couldn't work out what it was, and I was thinking, is there some kind of a problem with this truck? I was a bit lost for ideas, and we decided to go ahead with the purchase. As soon as he got out and I drove away back home, the noise was gone, completely gone. And I realised that it wasn't the truck at all. It was his hearing aid reacting with the radio, making a really high-pitched noise coming through the speakers. And then that's it. So now all the tests are complete, we will now hopefully be in a situation where we can buy the vehicle. And at this point there are really three different situations we can be in. The first is what we all really want, and that's that we're ready to buy the vehicle at the price we agreed. So I'll give the buyer a call, I'll give him my quick appraisal of the vehicle over the phone. Like I said, he or she should already have a very good idea of what we're buying anyway. So really, the less I have to tell them about the vehicle, I suppose the better. If we don't already have them, I'll give the bank account details over the phone, then I'll fill out the V5 logbook for the customer, or I'll walk them through the process of doing it online to let the DVLA know they've sold the vehicle to the motor trade. It might take a bit longer if there's finance to pay off, but usually it only takes a few minutes for the money to be transferred. So by the time we've done the V5, they can check over their account, and more often than not, the money's already there, job done. But what about situations 2 and 3? Well, let's start with situation 2, which is the one that we definitely don't want, which is that there's a serious issue with the car, which means that we actually don't want it, and I will have to sadly walk away from the vehicle. And that's usually going to be something like the engine light coming on during a test drive, which sadly has happened. Or there could be multiple paint defects, which would mean that there might be multiple panels that will need repainting. That could be an expensive job. There could be unexplained mechanical noise. In a nutshell, if it's going to be potentially more expensive to fix the vehicle than there is profit in that vehicle once we've bought it, then obviously it's not worth proceeding with the sale, and we do sadly have to walk away. No one wants that situation, of course. I like to think that there is an innocent explanation for a vehicle not being as described. I mean, not everyone has the knowledge of cars or the trained eye of someone like me. Obviously, I've looked at hundreds of cars, so they may have been genuinely unaware of these problems. Situation 3 is where we need to renegotiate the price in order to cover any repairs to the vehicle that we weren't expecting. But if there's some kind of damage or problem that the buyer was not aware of, then obviously I need to let them know, and we're then going to need to renegotiate on how much we're paying for the vehicle in order to cover our costs of getting it up to forecourt standard. It is business at the end of the day, I suppose. So I'll report back by phone. I may include photos if I can. I'll WhatsApp the buyer some photos, let them know exactly what the problem is as best I can, and then they'll call the customer and speak to them directly in order to renegotiate a price. I'm just the driver, so that's not my job to set or negotiate the price myself. I find most people will be prepared to negotiate on the price, but very occasionally they won't. Obviously it is up to them at the end of the day, it's still their vehicle, and yeah, we end up having to walk away from that as well. And so finally, we're all done. I drive away from the customer's location to maintain their privacy a bit, and then out comes my camera and you get to see the car finally. Oh yes, deliveries. We also do deliveries, of course. These are much more simple. I won't deliver a car to a customer unless they've paid for it in full already, of course. So it's usually just a case of simply handing over the keys and the paperwork. I give them a chance, of course, to have a decent look around the vehicle in their own time, take it for a test drive, make sure they're happy with everything, and then, yeah, I'm just on my way. And I have to say, nearly everyone I've met over the past few years of doing this has been really, really nice. Whether or not I've done a delivery or a collection, you do get to meet some genuinely really nice people. So there you go. I hope that's shed a little bit of light on what I'm doing off camera between saying goodbye to you at the railway station and introducing you to the vehicle I've just bought a little bit later in the day. And I hope it's given you a little bit of insight into what's actually involved when we go out and we buy a used vehicle. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Please do subscribe if you're able to. Every sub is appreciated and it really does help me grow the channel. But I hope to see you again soon on another future adventure collecting a random vehicle from a random place in the UK for the motor trade. So until then, bye for now.